Good afternoon and welcome to this bite-sized QA webinar. My name is Matt Adey and I'm the co-chair of QA's Student Strategic Advisory Committee. This session aims to explore the experience of students and their representatives in encountering the concept of no detriment, which we know has been adopted by a number of providers across the UK as a means of mitigating the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly with reference to their academic regulations and policies and procedures for the assessment and award of credit. I'm delighted to say that we're welcomed today by a number of members drawn from QA's cross-UK Student Strategic Advisory Committee. Sophie Banks, an SU staff member from the University of South Wales Students' Union, Jack O'Neill, President of Royal Holloway Students' Union, and Ruth Carlson, a final year course representative from the University of Surrey. Sophie, if I can come to you first, there's obviously been a lot of talk over the past few months about no detriment or safety net policies, as a number of institutions have referred to them. Sophie, what is your understanding of these?
Well, most commonly, no detriment approaches are a means of mitigating against a particular set of circumstances, such as a global pandemic. This means that individual students are not unfairly disadvantaged by a requirement to change the rules and regulations of something that's beyond their control. So in context, what that means is that universities are being calculating what they expected students to achieve on a particular assignment that they would have completed during lockdown. Then they will look at the actual grade that the student achieves, and if their actual grade is lower than they expected, the no detriment policy would come into play. And then this allows the universities to give them a more favourable outcome, such as a pass mark or maybe progression to the next year's study.
Fantastic, thank you. And within your role, is no detriment something that you've seen a lot of in the past couple of months?
Yes, definitely. It's been quite big. We've had a lot of student-led petitions for it as well. We're working a lot with the quality assurance department in the university. They've got a no detriment email and we're updating the frequently asked questions all the time.
Great, thanks for that. Jack, turning now to you, as a sabbatical officer throughout this pandemic, what's been your experience with no detriment? Was this something that you actively looked at Royal Holloway?
Yeah, so at Royal Holloway, I think we were quite lucky in that we were discussing with the university quite early on about different ways that we can make sure that students aren't negatively impacted by coronavirus purely because of the move and alteration in assessment. The difficulty obviously was that, as Sophie said, students were talking about it massively at a high level. There were lots of petitions, which was really great, and they wanted that reassurance early. But I suppose as a representative, the difficulty is that, you know, we're in the sphere of quality standards more day to day, and we recognise that it wasn't necessarily as easy to quickly implement as maybe everyone assumed. So that was a challenge. But one of the luxuries that we deal with is that students talk to other students at other universities. So as soon as one of the institutions led, there was the expectation that this was possible. But I think in terms of my personal experience being a student representative at Royal Holloway, was that it was good because we were able to quite clearly say that university are very adamant that they want to set about this policy, and now we're working with them to actually sort through the various challenges, because as we all know, it's a great thing to make sure students aren't negatively impacted, but there's various different nuances that we have to try and navigate through to make sure it works for everyone.
Great, thank you. And Ruth, you're obviously now in your final year of study. As you come to the end, what's been your experience with no detriment? Is this something you think there's a strong understanding amongst the wider student population about?
Yeah, so I think personally, obviously it's helped me because like many other students, we've all moved home, we're not in our normal environment. So typically as a master's student, it'd be 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. in the library, break for lunch, walk around the lake. And the change from that to then, oh, now I need to pack everything up, go home. I don't have a computer that can even run the softwares that I need because I study engineering. So even that was a massive thing. And at the start, no detriment hadn't been finalised yet. So it was very stressful. I was thinking, well, I won't be able to finish my work, let alone do well in my work. So on a personal note, it was very helpful. And I'm sure for many other people, they feel the same. But in terms of does everyone understand it, I think at the start the language that was used wasn't necessarily the most accessible, but now more students are kind of becoming little activists in a way, so they're getting understanding through this of some things that they never would have done before, which is a positive. They know more about the structure of their course, how much percentage each year is worth, and all that kind of thing. So I think it took a little bit to get it across to everyone, but they got there in the end. And the feedback that they've been asking for as well has been quite surprising in a way, that they're always trying to improve it. You know, have we done well at this? Have we not? And I think that's a real positive to come out of this.
That's great to hear, as I think we can all attest on this committee. Academic regulations are pretty dry, and it's not easy to kind of garner engagement and enthusiasm for them. But it's great to hear that at Surrey, at least, you've had that experience where people are taking a lot more of an interest in terms of the structure of their degree. And lastly, and I'll open this up to everybody, do you think that no detriment approaches, or safety nets as some providers are calling them, are necessarily the silver bullet solution that they've been made up to be? Because there's been a lot of talk about that in the past couple of months. So, any thoughts?
I think they're really important, because it is unreasonable for universities to believe that students can achieve to the same level that they were prior to lockdown. As Ruth said, she's had to move back home. That's changed her working habits, her studying habits. But some students have had to find jobs, some have care responsibilities, some have been ill themselves. And I think it is unreasonable for universities to expect the same level. So I think a no detriment approach is really helpful in terms of cushioning them. However, I do think personally that it depends on the type of approach that's put into place. If it acts like a extenuating circumstances that allows students to submit their assessments, but they know they've got that cushioning, I think that works well. But if it's more of a blanket, you're going to pass regardless, I think it stops students having that learning experience for the last couple of months. Those final assessments were a massive learning experience. So that's where I feel it depends. It depends on the type of approach.
Absolutely. Jack, Ruth, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'll try and give maybe two different sides of the coin on it. I think I completely agree with Sophie. I think that the benefits that it gives and the reassurance, I mean, as Ruth said, the worry that you weren't going to be able to do your studies, let alone achieve in your studies, was immense. So I think that short-term reassurance was really useful. I think it also prompted good questions. I think that, you know, when looking at the different course structures, if someone's credits were aligned in a particular way that it meant that doing a safety net policy was difficult to work out, then it raised questions of the resilience of that assessment structure in the first place as well. So I do think it was good. I'm glad that as a sector we moved towards it. I do think that it presents other challenges. I think that as a sector, that because we've moved towards implementing them on such a vast scale, we've almost admitted that in these circumstances, students may not be able to achieve their academic potential. And in admitting that, it almost poses a challenge to then next year, where we may still need to be manoeuvring and adjusting different methods. So how do we approach that and communicate that to students with confidence, considering we've admitted this term that, do you know what, because of the circumstances, you may not be able to achieve what you were achieving before?
Yeah, I think I'd just add that for me, because I was at Surrey for 4.5 years until this happened. So I'd done my bachelor's and I was in my master's of engineering, so just that 1 year. So I only really had half a semester to go. And as far as I'm concerned, I had tested I'd reached my potential in those 4.5 years. But for somebody who was maybe in their first year or second year, I would be a bit worried about, even in their engineering ability, if they would reach what I got in that time. Because I think your studies do change as you go through. So I think for first and second year, it's your fundamentals. And if those aren't properly, not tested in a way, but if those aren't, tough to do, then potentially further through the course, it might get more difficult. Not to say that a no detriment policy reduces your learning and your outcomes, but I just think the year that this has happened for people will have a difference. For the final year students, I don't think that it would have made much of an impact. For me, I don't think.
Okay, thank you for that, folks. That's great to hear. Okay, and on that note, I'll bring this bite-sized webinar to a close. I'd like to thank all our panel members for their contributions today, and thank you for joining.